Hi everyone, my name is Stavros, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about my values and an exercise that I use to help me pinpoint what my top values are. Honestly, this exercise really surprised me, and I think that if you're struggling to figure out why you make certain decisions or how to help motivate yourself, this exercise might be the perfect thing for you. The exercise I'm talking about is a values exercise by Brené Brown. It's called her Dare to Lead list of values, and I'll have it linked in the description below. But basically what this exercise is, it's a list of over 100 values. I think there's like 150 values on this list. And ultimately your goal is to whittle down that list to your top 2 values. It is incredibly difficult to do. My therapist gave me this exercise and he suggested that I first bring it down to a list of my top 10 values, and then from that 10 whittle it down to my top 2. That made it a little bit easier, but still it was an extremely difficult exercise to do, but it really helped open my eyes to a lot of things and helped me kind of question what I find important and why I find those things important. Like I said, this is really tough. My strategy going into it was I thought, okay, I'm going to go through this list and cross off the ones that I know for sure are not in my top 10, that are either not important to me or I just know for sure aren't going to make it there. And so I went and I took my time, I went through and I crossed off a whole bunch of these off the list. And I thought, okay, I've done it. I've gotten a lot off of this list. And when I counted what was left afterwards, I still had 47 values left on this list. And I just didn't know how I was going to whittle that down to a top 10. And I basically just continued that over and over. Now I took this list of 47 and I cut a few out, and so on and so forth. But as I did that, I found myself cutting values that I thought, how can I cut this? When I cut love off of the list, I thought, is love really not important to me? Is it not important enough to be in the top 10? At some point I cut kindness off of the list, and I thought, I'm not a horrible person. Kindness should be on this list. But it really forced me to question for myself, what is actually the most important to you? And eventually I made it down to a top 12, and then I cut 2 more and made it to a top 10. But those last 2, I kind of feel like for me are like honorable mentions for my total of top 10. So the last 2 that I cut out of my list before I ultimately had my top 10 were financial stability, which I kind of felt only made it as far as it did because, not necessarily because it's something that's like super important to me foundationally, but rather because I truly believe that you basically need financial stability in order to be able to do almost anything else right now in our world, in order to feel comfortable, for me to feel comfortable. So it made it pretty far, but ultimately is not on my list of like top 10 core values. It's more of a tool that helps me then perform other things. And the other one that just barely made it out of my top 10 was competence. That's partly because I really like to feel competent and I like to feel like I can handle any situation that might be coming my way. And so I really place really high value on that. Me feel, not necessarily people feeling confident, but me, I want to feel competent. Partly for myself, but then also partly, I think, for other people to see me as competent. And so I think that's kind of partially why right at the end that did not quite make it into the top 10. And now before I share my top 10 and ultimately my top 2 core values, I really encourage you to pause this video and take the exercise yourself. Like I said, I'll have it linked in the description below, but take some time, go through and kind of create your top 10 and top 2 values. I really encourage you to do that before listening to the rest of my explanations because I don't want you to have any biases going into this. I really think it's the most valuable if you can go into it purely looking at it with yourself in mind, and then come back and listen to the rest of this and kind of see where we align and where we misalign with different things. But I really strongly encourage you to take some time and go through and do the exercise yourself before listening to the rest of this video. So the rest of my top 10, in no particular order, are community, family, friendship, home, leisure, nature, optimism, and reliability. All these things felt just wrong to my core to cut out as I was cutting things out from this list. And obviously they didn't end up being my top 2, but they just felt foundational to me. They just felt wrong to cut out. Whether it was community and family and friends. I'm someone who really loves to have my tribe of people around me, just people that I know that I can rely on and that can rely on me, hence reliability. Whether it be home and nature, 2 places that I always feel super safe and comfortable and that I love to spend my leisure time in, whether with my family or with my friends. And then optimism. I just am always trying to be optimistic. It's just become something where I think just part of my nature. I'm always going to look on the bright side of things in any situation. And so all of these things just felt so foundational and so strong when I thought about myself that I just couldn't cut them out as I was going down and crossing out things from this huge list. But none of these were my top 2. They made it pretty close, obviously, but they didn't quite make it all the way there. And although I kind of feel like maybe I'm cheating the system a little bit with how I'm considering and thinking about my top 2 values, ultimately all of these did not make it into my top 2. So finally, what are my top 2 values out of this list of over 100 values? I've cut out so much and so many things to get to this top 2, this final 2. I'd really love to hear what your thoughts are. What do you think my top 2 are? In the comments down below. I'd love to hear them before I reveal them. But ultimately, the reveal for my top 2 values are health and fun. Health and fun. Those are my top 2 core values. Like I said, I kind of feel a little bit like maybe I'm cheating a little bit when I choose this, but when I think about having fun, and fun being one of my core values, I think about having fun with my family and friends and my community. I think about having fun at home, in nature, during my leisure time. Having fun for me is just something that's so important, and I think about doing it with all of these other things and these other values kind of combined into it. And then health. Health is something that I just feel you need in order to be able to have fun, in order to be able to live a long and healthy life. And so as I went down and I whittled away at this list and made it smaller and smaller and smaller, it just became clearer and clearer to me that these 2 values were the 2 values that stood out, that just kind of called to me. And felt like a no-brainer that these 2 values were my top 2 core values. And it became more and more clear after completing the exercise and I started thinking about it, how these 2 values really drive a lot of my decision making. Health was a pretty clear one, and I kind of already could have probably told you that before the exercise. I've had some recent health scares and struggles, and over the past couple of years I've really been focusing on improving my health and having my health be as good as it can possibly be in order for myself to feel strong and capable. I'm working on my flexibility. And then when I think about that and I think about health as a core value, it makes a lot of sense why I like karate so much and why I value martial arts and going to train and doing that thing, because it's helping me improve my health, and why I value and want to set aside time for mobility work and stretching so that I can continue to move and be active and do things with my friends and my family and my community over the years. And so that one, to me, I could have probably told you that beforehand. It wasn't necessarily a surprise to see that in my top 2. But what did feel like more of a surprise was that fun made it all the way to my top 2. That one was a bit shocking. But as I sat with it more and I really considered how I make decisions, I realized that, yeah, fun is really high on that list. I'm always thinking about what am I going to have the most fun doing? And it wasn't really a conscious choice before. But now that I've done this and I've realized, yeah, no, this is something that I'm actively considering all the time. Whether it's what book I'm going to read next, it's what am I going to enjoy the most and have the most fun reading. Whether it's video games or board games, whether it's what do I just do with my time? Which friend do I go hang out with today? Or what do I do with my time? I'm often thinking about what is going to be the most fun. And if I'm just not having fun doing something anymore, whether it's a hobby or something like that, I'm okay with kind of saying, you know what? I had fun while I was doing this for the amount of time that I did, but now I want to try and do something else that I'm going to have more fun doing. And so it really became clear to me that, yeah, over the past few years, fun has just been so high up there in how I'm making my decisions. And it just was not something that I really realized until I sat down and looked at this long list and started whittling things down and found, oh yeah, wow, fun is something that I actively think about so often. And I didn't even know. So after doing this exercise, I can so much more clearly see why I make the decisions that I make and how I make those decisions. It really just opened my eyes and forcing myself to sit down and actually look at and cross things out and figure out, okay, what are the most important things to me? Figuring out my top 10 and ultimately my top 2 almost made me feel like this is how I could describe myself to other people. These are the things that make up who I am as a person. And it was really cool to actually sit down and spend the time figuring that out and almost learning a bit about myself and who I am and what's important to me. So I really hope that you took the time to actually do this exercise, because I think it was so valuable to me, and I think that if you actually take the time and sit down with it, it could be so valuable to you as well. If you did take the time to do it, thank you, and let me know what your thoughts about it were in the comments below, and I'd love to know what your top 2 values are. Until next time.